Thank you for joining us today for the Disability Organizing Network, or DO Network's Dialogues in Disability, Pride, and Culture, the ADA Legacy Project. And thank you for joining us. My name is Ted Jackson. I'm the Community Organizing Director for California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. And I'll be our facilitator today and introducing Mark, and then maybe facilitating some questions during the question and answer period towards the end. So Mark Johnson is our speaker today, and he's going to tell us about the ADA Legacy Project. He's the Director of Advocacy at the Shepherd Center. And Mark Johnson is a man marking decades in 2011. He turned 60 in June and will celebrate his 30-year wedding anniversary in October. He observed the 40th anniversary of the fateful dive into a sand quarry in May. The accident plunged him into an unexpected world of disability advocacy, and he's over-the-top passionate about it. He encourages people to take it personally and be the change. Sought-after speaker nationwide, Johnson recently spoke at the Missouri History Museum as part of the Max Starkoff Speaker Series commemorating the 20th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, and the 40th anniversary of the Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act, the DD Act. Johnson has been recognized for his ground floor work with the Americans, with the Americans Disabled for Accessible Public Transportation, otherwise known as ADAPT, for his visionary work planning the ADA Torch Relay, which celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and with multiple awards including the Betts Award in 2007, Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities Advocate of the Year Award in 2003, New Mobility Person of the Year in 2001, and as a member of the ADA Task Force on Rights and Empowerment of People with Disabilities in 1991. Mark Johnson is passionate about changing attitudes. He says, unless there is emotional change, no intellectual persuasion will work. Normalizing disability is central to an inclusive community. Johnson emphasizes you have to take it personally. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to thank the Foundation and Ted as well as Shannon for your assistance. And I'll take some responsibility for any technical problems because I'm not at the computer that has my headset. So if you have a hard time hearing me, just feel free to chime in like Shannon says, and I'm sure she'll let me know that I either need to speak louder, get closer to the phone, or whatever. But I really appreciate all of you taking this time out of your busy days to learn a little more about the Legacy Project. First slide, just briefly, back in August 2012, there was a gathering, and Dan Wilkins from Ohio actually designed this logo. The background is in, like I said, August 2012, about 25 folks from around the country got together and started talking about, how can we do a better job of preserving, celebrating, and educating people about the history. There are a lot of folks in different communities around the country doing great work, but how could we do something collectively? And this conversation kind of came about because of a screening of the documentary Life's Worth Living that played on PBS a couple times that outlines the history of our movement from 1968 to 1990. The initial sponsors of that summit were the AmeriGroup Foundation and the Shepherd Center, where I work here in Atlanta. As indicated, that was in August 2nd through the 12th of 2012. And that just shows kind of a nice mix of the 25 people that were there. And so at that time, that's when the ADA Legacy Project was founded. Just go to the next slide. Just some of the folks at the last moment when about 10 folks had already left, we said, hey, let's get a picture for historical purposes. You might recognize some of the people in that. Tom Owens, who's been photographing the movie for over 40 years. Dan over there to your left in that power assist chair up in Ohio, who works a lot with the Disability Study Program at the University of Toledo and works for the Independent Living Center. So there are a number of people there that you might recognize. Next slide. Whoops. Our mission, to honor the contributions of people with disabilities and their allies by preserving and promoting the history of the disability rights movement, by celebrating the impact of the ADA as well as other milestones in disability history, and by educating the public and future generations. So this isn't just about the past, it's about the past, present, and future. Next slide. As indicated, past, present, future. Some of you might recognize that picture. That was the march in 1990 before the crawl up the steps. There are people there, like you'll see Michael Winters, who is from the California area and passed away. Evan Kemp, Mustard District, used to be the commissioner of EOC. There are a number of people there that you might recognize. Next slide. If you indicate, like you say, you just kind of get those terms past, present, future, preserving, celebrating, educating. That's our mission. Next slide. Our leadership fiscal agent is the National Council on Independent Living in D.C. Oversight, if you go to adalegacy.com and you hit About Us, you can hit Leadership and you'll see who currently is involved in the Coordinating Council. We didn't want to have a board of directors and have kind of a top-down thing, but we wanted people, diverse group of people around the country helping coordinating the project as well as ADA 25. Currently we have a number of work groups. We have one for preservation, one for celebration, and one for education. And on the website is an actual description of each of those work groups and some of their goals. Right now we currently have 2 part-time staff here in Atlanta coordinating this effort. Next slide. Our role, once again, we don't want to plan everything and ask you to be involved in it. Rather, we want to be a clearinghouse to what you may be doing. We want to connect what people are doing. We want to coordinate what people are doing. And most importantly, we want to start communicating what people are doing, like this webinar hopefully does. Next slide. Our goals under preservation: encourage the collection of historical materials. I know they're in California. Currently, there are some folks at the Paul K. Longmore Institute and the Bancroft folks and the folks at the Ed Roberts campus are working on an exhibit that would be at the campus as well as travel pieces of it. So we're encouraging people to do that kind of collection around the country. There's here in Georgia, Ohio, or wherever it might be. We're also connecting efforts to preserve, promote, and exhibit materials. You know, there's a brick and mortar museum in Buffalo, New York that actually has traveling panels. That there's actually an exhibit right now in Birmingham, Alabama that highlights 5,000 years of disability history that will be on display until May 6th. So there are a number of people out there, once again, doing things. It just hasn't been connected, and that's what the project's trying to do, is connect those different initiatives and then promote and then obviously educate the community. Next slide. Our partners right now under preservation, as indicated, Ed Roberts campus, the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, which is opening here on May 22nd in Atlanta. The Smithsonian, which created an exhibit in the year 2000 for the 10th anniversary of ADA, and now has taken that exhibit and put it online and updated it. And also here, the University of Georgia Richard Russell Library for Political Research and Studies has begun to take people's collections. Next slide. Our goals, well, coordinate the activities for ADA 25 anniversary in 2015. Obviously, the actual anniversary isn't until July 26th of next year, but we're starting a legacy tour this July in Houston that will build toward the momentum until next July. And as we're seeing, more and more local, state, and national events are being played. In addition, on the ADA Legacy website, you can hit ADA 25, and you can hit a toolkit, which is a kit that's being developed to help local communities develop their own events, sample proclamations, talking points, fact sheets. So we're trying to make it easy for local communities to organize their own anniversaries with their own spin. Next slide. Our partners right now, the Abilities Expo goes to 7 cities, so the tour will be going to 7 cities. The ADA National Network, they'll be holding workshops at the expos along the tour. Beacon Press, who has contracted Leonard Davis in Chicago to write a 25th anniversary book. Faircount Media Group down in Florida, they're doing an ADA 25 commemorative publication that will be available where we can drop ship it to your community or to major events you're doing. Gallaudet University, National Council on Independent Living, and the Viscardi Center up in New York, which is planning an event at the UN. Next slide. Our goals under education, once again, think of preservation, celebration, and now education. Obviously the goals of education are to promote the development and use of educational curricula that shares the history and contributions. I know there in California you have some legislation that makes it possible to integrate lessons about our movement into the mainstream curriculum of history. There's some other states that are doing the same thing. And so instead of reinventing curriculum all around the country, where are the best practices? How can we share those? How can we raise awareness about current issues? And we know the work's not done, and we know that the media next year will ask at minimum 2 questions. What difference has ADA made, and what still needs to be done? And then we want to promote involvement and advocacy, obviously, because the folks back in '68 with the Architecture Barriers Act did a great job. The folks with 504 did a great job. The folks with the ADA did a great job, but there's still a lot more advocacy that needs to be done. Next slide. Our partners right now, AAPD out of DC, Disability Studies, is actually developing an academic quarterly. They have an academic quarterly now, and they'll actually be are in the process of developing an ADA 25 academic journal for next year that talks about the past, present, and future. The Minnesota DD Council right now is creating 30-plus moments in history. They've already completed 14. So if you go to ADA Legacy website, hit education, hit partners, and hit the Minnesota DD Council website, you can already experience some of those moments in history. The National Disability Leadership Alliance, which is actually 14 consumer national groups that issued a call to action last July that said, hey, we'll be happy to celebrate the 25th anniversary of ADA if the following things are done by July of next year, like doing away with the sub-minimum wage, removing the institutional bias in our long-term care system. The Federation of the Blind is a partner. They do an annual law curriculum or a symposium, and they'll be organizing one for 2015. The Society on Disability Studies, which I talked about a little bit. Storyline Motion Pictures, which did the documentary Life's Worth Living, and they've already done a school-age version with the curriculum. And Welcome Change Productions, which is working on an ADA app for 2015. All the information about these particular, preserve, celebrate, and educate goals, and all the partners are at adalegacy.com, and you can find information about what they're doing and get in touch with them. Next slide. So how do you get involved? There's a lot of ways to get involved. One is what you're actually doing today. The other is if you haven't started, bringing stakeholders together in your community, there's an opportunity to bring them together and do exactly what I'm doing. This PowerPoint presentation that I'm doing is available for you to use to your benefit. You can start having conversations about how we, preserving, celebrating, educating our history. What kinds of planning are we doing for the 25th anniversary? I was talking to some folks out there in California recently that obviously do the West Coast Disability Pride Parade and Festival. And the fact that they want to expand that is exciting for 2015. So I know some of you are involved already in your 24th anniversary events, but beginning to talk about 25th so we can truly have this absolutely collective, massive anniversary that not just talks about the past once again, but talks about the present and future. You can become a partner. There's actually a place on the website where you can click on and become a partner, like some of the folks that I indicated earlier, whether it's at Roberts campus, whether it's the Smithsonian, whether it's the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. There's actually a fact sheet in there of what constitutes a partner. You can join a work group, whether it's preservation, celebration, or education, be involved at the national level, or you can create that own structure in your own community, meaning different works groups. If you want to, you can provide financial support. Anything from become part of the 25 for 25 network, where our goal is 1,000 people by this July. That would give $25 toward this national coordination and communication effort. You can visit the website. I've referenced it several times, adalegacy.com. There's a lot of information there. If you look at the Get Involved section, you can click on a map, and the map of the United States there, and you can click on your state, whether it's California, Wisconsin, or any of the other states that have joined us today. You can also, and if you don't see anything there, it may be because there's nothing there, or it may be because we're not aware of what you're doing, but we're happy to promote it and put it up there. There's another section on the calendar there under Get Involved. There's certain events that we're starting to post there. So if you've got some events related to ADA or other display rights laws, or related to history, preservation, celebration, or education, we're happy to post it. You can like us on Facebook. We're slightly over 1,500 likes so far. Obviously, there's a lot more of us out there, so if you want to take the time and like us on Facebook. And then we're beginning to use other forms of social media to get the word out that there is this project, there is this unprecedented opportunity to organize around the 25th anniversary of ADA. If you want to start a local ADA 25 group, go for it. You don't need my permission, and you don't need a charter, and you don't have to send any money, but just go ahead and start planning for the 25th anniversary and use that as an opportunity to tell your story and to elevate some of the issues in your community. It may be work you're already doing, but tie it once again to the 25th anniversary of ADA and create some kind of sense of urgency about the things that need to be done between now and then, and obviously the things for the next 25 years. Next slide.
And Mark, by the way, Mark, you do have time to do your poll.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, because I've been talking awful fast. So support our work. Once again, we are currently, we had a sponsor for the summit in 2012. We had a sponsor last year that allowed us to hire 2 part-time staff people, as well as create the ADAlegacy.com website. And we're currently now raising money for the tour, which will start this July. I just got off the phone this morning with Matrix Theater up in Detroit. Some of you may have seen a picture of, or actually had your picture taken with the Justin Dark puppet. You know, it's a very, very large puppet that takes about 2 or more people to operate, and we'll be taking that puppet to some of the tour sites. So we're raising money to make sure we can take that puppet around. The other thing we're raising money for is, some of you may have remembered when Jim Ward and Tom Olin traveled the country for a year around the ADA amendments, promoting ADA and the need to pass the amendments. And they traveled in an RV, a 37-foot RV, that was wrapped with pictures related to the signing of ADA. Some of the pictures that you've already seen on this PowerPoint presentation. And so our hope is to take, we found that RV, a group in Oregon bought it, they're restoring it, and the hope is that we can take that RV on the road from this July to next July, and also get the puppet to several sites. So we're obviously raising money to support, you know, that RV getting around, that puppet getting around, and some of these materials that are already out there about our movement from city to city. So there are different sponsorship levels, there are different championship levels, but what I'd really encourage is just become part of the 25 for 25 network, which is a $25 contribution. We pop your name on the website, and that in itself makes a statement about, you know, support. Next slide. Once again, stay connected. Constantly visit the ADA Legacy website. You know, there's constantly information being added to it. Once again, like us on Facebook, share that on your Facebook, and more you'll begin to see on Twitter. One more, I think there's one more. Questions? Kristen right now is one of the 2 part-time staff we have. Her phone number here in Georgia, her email. Obviously, you're welcome to get in touch with me. So that, if you have any questions, or do you want to do the poll?
Let me go ahead and do the poll, and then I already have a question, and I'll kick us off, and I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience today have questions. So is there a particular slide you want me to move back to for the poll?
No, I think what I'd like to do on the poll is just how many had already heard of the project, Be the first poll.
Okay, so.
And then the second poll would be, have any of you started your planning efforts for
Okay, great.
27? So maybe we can break it down.
So the first question we're going to ask is how many people have heard of the ADA Legacy Project before? And you can go to that checkbox at the top of your screen here and just put your cursor on it, and you can click on the green check mark for yes, you've heard of it before, and the X for no, you haven't. Oh, I see the numbers popping up. All right, so it looks like good numbers, percentage-wise for you, Mark, and for the ADA Legacy Project. It looks like 14 people who responded have heard of the ADA Legacy Project before, and for 4 people, just went up. Okay, so 15 people have heard of it before, 5 people have not heard of it before. So 75% of the folks have heard of it before. Now 16 people. So I think you're doing a really good job with education, and I'm really happy that we can be a part of that here today. So Shannon, can you go ahead and, or I'll just go ahead and clear the poll, and let's do another poll. And your second question, Mark, was, do people have plans for the 25th anniversary of the ADA? So click on the green check mark if you've already got plans, whether it's you personally or your organization. If you've already got plans, and click on the red X if you are looking for something to do for the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Mark Ramoser from Silicon Valley Independent Living Center always makes wonderful observations, and he observed that, well, we've all heard of it through the emails announcing this webinar. So I hope that this webinar was a good educational tool for the ADA Legacy Project. It looks like 10, 11, wow, about 50% of the people on the webinar system today have plans, or their organizations have plans to educate and celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the same amount, 11 people or 11 organizations, 50%, are still looking for something to do. So I hope for those people that this webinar today kind of gave you some ideas of what you could do, or made a connection with either this organization or another organization that you could be a part of to celebrate and educate on the ADA and its 25th anniversary. So I'm gonna, we're starting to get some questions already, Mark, and I'm gonna kick us off with the first question about something that you mentioned partway through, only because those of us here in California have worked on it quite a bit. You mentioned that California has its own law that was passed that implements disability history in the schools, and disability history is so much a part of your project. So our law is called the Fair Education Act. And Fair Education Act stands for, FAIR stands for fair, accurate, inclusive, and respectful. And what it does is it implements both LGBT history and disability history in California's K-12 schools. And one of the things that we've done here at California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, as well as the Disability Organizing Network and the other program here at CFILC, Youth Organized YO, Disabled and Proud, is do some work on getting materials and workshops and everything for implementing disability history by training teachers and having youth involved with that process and community advocates involved with that process. Is your organization, the ADA Legacy Project, are you putting together any materials or syllabuses, curriculum, or anything coming out of this energy and this effort that we could use in helping teachers learn disability history?
It's a great question. I think one is, I'll be happy to send you some. There's actually some interesting lesson plans, like on the Anti-Defamation League website, But I can send you 3 or 4 websites where there's some existing content. Also, the Life's Worth Living documentary that I referenced a couple of times. Charlie Carr, who's the commissioner of like the Voc Rehab Agency in Massachusetts, provided some money to take that and break that down into a school-age version with some curriculum, and that's available. So I'll follow up with you and Shannon with some of those links. The hope is that ultimately we can gather some of that and create a better spot on the website for it to find it. And of course, anything that y'all develop, we'd like to get out there. So, once again, part of the purpose, a major role that hopefully the Legacy Project plays is a clearinghouse in communication, because we don't need to be reinventing wheels.
That's great. And so now, Mark, do you want to go to the questions that are in the chat box? Can you see the 3 questions there?
Yeah,
or do you need me to read them for you?
No, that's great.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read them, Mark, just because we're recording this for for use later on. So the first question is from Summit ILC in Hamilton, Montana. And the question is, are you working on radio or TV PSAs that would be available for distribution?
It's a great question. Not yet. But it's the kind of stuff that we would be adding to the toolkit, so that, once again, you and your local community don't have to create that. If you have ideas also, I mean, if you have some scripts already, if you have some spots you've played at other awareness events, we'd love to know more about it. But that's the kind of content that would be in the toolkit, which is already there. It's just not as much information in the toolkit that we'll have by the 24th anniversary this year, or by the time the 25th anniversary comes around. So the goal is to, I think, before we work on them, to identify what's already there and just try to get it out to more of us. If there are ideas you have, but yeah, that's the kind of content we want to have in that toolkit, so you can use it in Montana or wherever else.
Great. Now the next question is from Cindy Soto, and Cindy Soto is a community organizer and systems change advocate at Communities Actively Living Independent and Free, which is the ILC in downtown Los Angeles. And Cindy wants to know, are there any state coordinators around the country? And I'm assuming she means state coordinators for the ADA Legacy Project.
That's a great question. I think the state that's the furthest along as far as, I think, collective thought is probably Wisconsin. There's a woman named Jean Logan. Even though she lives here in Atlanta, she's working with people like Dan Johnson and some folks in Wisconsin, and getting the stakeholders there to talk about not just the project, but talk about the 25th anniversary and start planning efforts. So the structure right now is, if you want to self-identify and say, hey, I want to lead in my city or my county or my state or my region, we're more than happy to pop you up on the website so we can connect you with other people. So the closest thing right now to an official state coordinator is probably Wisconsin.
Great.
And you can go to the Get Involved section, and you can click on the map, and you can click on the state of Wisconsin, and I'll have to double check that they've updated their stuff, but they're putting stuff up there about their planning efforts there. And other states, if that model works for you, great. If you have a model that might work better for you, embrace that. But if you want to start using the term ADA 25 in your city or state, feel free to, just to kind of show that there is this collective organizing effort going on around.
Do you use that as a hashtag, Mark, on social media?
Not yet. I mean, we are not that far down the road with social media, other than the initial Facebook page and the Twitter.
So if we started using a hashtag ADA25, that would be great. Okay,
I think that would be great.
Excellent. And since Cindy asked this question, I'm going to assume that Cindy's part of the DO Network. She's one of the organizers in the DO Network. So I'm wondering if Cindy wants to be our statewide coordinator for whatever the DO Network does with ADA 25. I'm kind of chuckling as I ask that, but I'll talk to her about it later. And then the next question really is about fundraising. and it comes from Randy Hicks, and Randy is a community member and activist with Californians for Disability Rights here in California. And he wants to know, how has the state helped you with big donors who are donors to members of the legislature? So have you had any of your your champions in the legislature also hit up their donors to support the project?
It's another good question. We haven't yet. Our biggest stuff was, working with Charlie up there in Massachusetts to take the Lives Worth Living to the next level. I know that Gene Logan, who I referenced earlier, working with the Wisconsin, they actually are working on a state line item that would help fund some anniversary activities. The major fundraising actually is just starting to occur. Now that we have this, template, meaning this website you can bring attention to, these partners you can bring attention to. If you think about it, you can go out there and say, hey, there's going to be a 25th anniversary book. There's going to be a 25th anniversary publication. Both the National ADA Symposium and the Society on Disability Studies are having their conferences here in Atlanta in 2015. There's going to be traveling exhibits like the one there in 504, about 504, or the ones that are available out of Buffalo. So my point is you have the opportunity in your community to just use the Legacy Project and ADA 25 and 25th anniversary to raise monies for the things you're going to be doing in your community. So the short answer to your question is we haven't had that many conversations with members of the legislature yet. The long answer is it's wide open for all of us.
Great. And now, are there any questions on the teleconference line? Folks who are on the teleconference line, if you are muted right now, you can unmute your phones. If you didn't use the mute button on your phone, you can press *6 to unmute your phones and ask a question of Mark. Anyone on the phone want to ask a question? So until folks can unmute their phones, Mark, I have a question, because it seems like you've got a lot of people involved with this, and there was that great photo at the beginning of your presentation of all the folks that first came together to form this project. For folks who are interested in joining your effort and who want to become a part of this, what's the time commitment like?
I think the time, that's another, all of y'all have good questions. I think the time commitment is really, what I'm trying to encourage people to do is don't, to the extent possible, don't look at becoming involved with the project or ADA 25 as more another thing to do. If you look at it as another thing to do, look at it as what are you doing now and how might you marry the two? If you're calling on your state legislature to do something, you might say, we want it done by July 26, 2015. So that's not an additional time commitment. That's just a way of reframing and repackaging your demand or your request. And if you're already working in school systems, to get teachers to talk about, incorporate or integrate, disability rights content into their lesson plans. Well, obviously saying, hey, there's this sense of urgency. Let's try to have this many school systems engaged by next summer. So I think the time commitment is, if you see it as another thing to do, then everybody's going to try to squeeze it on their busy plate. If people look at what they're already doing and kind of repackage it, that might be helpful. But my point is, the people that are involved right now, some are given a couple hours a week. Some, like Gene and whatnot, are given a day or two a week. Some depends on whether you're retired, whether you're a paid staff person, independent living center, or whether you're a person who has a job that's not specific to the disability rights movement, but you got a little free time. It's really up to you. It's really up to you.
And Mark, Along with that, I noticed that there were work groups. How often do the work groups meet, and for how long do they meet?
The work groups right now actually meet as needed. They started off regularly, monthly. Now they're kind of as needed. And there are little subgroups that are running off and kind of working together. And some of those groups were already working together before, and now they just got more people helping them do it. And that's what's kind of exciting about it is, you can call it Kim Nelson, who wrote a book about our movement up in Ohio, and Dan calls her when he needs her, bounces something off of her. So people are, you can call Colleen Wick and say, hey, I've got a suggestion for what moment 15 ought to be. Or you can do what you just did a while ago and said, how about starting to use that as a hashtag? That's all that kind of stuff's good because it's just building the buzz and it starts building the momentum. So, once again, your own time, and just use this, this 25th anniversary as the opportunity that it is.
Great. I just want to check in again. Are there any other questions from the teleconference line or from the chat room? Now would be a good time to unmute your phones and ask your questions. And we'll give folks another minute to do that, and I'll just ask another question. There's a lot of what we've seen today. There's a question from Randy Hicks, and he says, what's the timeline? I'm assuming that the real goal of this project is to get things ready for the 25th anniversary of the ADA. Is that right, Mark?
Yeah, the timeline, first of all, is the timeline for fundraising. Well, first of all, the first, I guess, initial activity, other than the summit in 12, other than the launch of the website last year, and is this year, May 22nd, is the opening of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. It'll be the first time where disability rights content is included in a center, not just for a day or a week or awareness month, but as long as that center is there. So May 22nd is the first, partnership activity. And then as I mentioned earlier, from this July to next July, there are things happening. So as far as the timeline for fundraising, real hard between now and July is the push, especially from a private sector. We're talking with 3 corporations now that are very interested in having more employee engagement in the anniversary. It may be attending an expo. It may be helping assist with the tour. It could be any number of things. There may be some in-kind time for some social media. So the fundraising is really just kicking off. Really started some this month, but a heavy push from April to July. The work groups are already meeting, like I said, as needed. And if you want to become part of the preservation, celebration, or education work group, you can go back to the question section on your PowerPoint and send an email to Kristen, or if you wanted to send it to me, you're welcome to do that. I would encourage you, it's nice to be involved in the national work group, but most importantly, I want you to create a conversation in your own community. I also see where Rebecca has the question, how many cities do you plan to travel to, and are they listed on the website? Another great question. If you click on ADA 25 and you go to the right side where it says want to know more, you can click on the Legacy Tour right now, and it lists the 8 cities or 9 cities in dates, but that continues to evolve. The goal potentially could be 25 cities, meaning 25th anniversary, 25 cities. And so when we kick it off in Houston this July, it then has to go to Boston in September. So there might be some mini stops between Houston and Boston. It will be out in the Bay Area. I know I heard somebody's in LA. It will be at the Expo in LA in 2015, but then it might be able to travel to several other cities in California between now and then. So the hard cities are the Expo cities, D.C. in July 2015, and then the event that they're planning at the UN. Those are the hard 9 cities, and then there's some potential for many stops along the way. So if you're a community that you look at that and say, hey, they're going to be in LA anyway, so why not come to this part of California or that part of California? That's all very possible. I mean, as indicated in that Ted, that was an elaborate introduction, by the way. But in that introduction, obviously, I was injured a little over 40 years ago, and obviously I've been involved with the movement for a little while. But the exciting thing is the opportunities for us to do something in our own community. And I just want to encourage you to think that your community first, connect that to things going on in other communities in your state. And I've always believed in possibilities, not perfection. So this will not be a perfect process, and we'll make mistakes and certain things won't work. But in the end, we have this unprecedented opportunities. And so when you kind of go, what other cities might it be in? Just think of the possibilities.
So Mark, thank you for the. There's another question on here, and I'll weigh into it.
Yeah, someone wanted me to clarify. Okay, if you go to, you want me to talk about that?
Go ahead and clarify that.
Okay. The Shirley Franklin, former mayor of Atlanta, when she left office 7 or so years ago, she came up with a legacy plan for Atlanta, and it was to build a National Center for Civil and Human Rights in downtown Atlanta. Coca-Cola donated the property. They raised money. They started phase 1. It's actually between, if any of you have ever been to Atlanta, it's in a great area. It's between the world's largest aquarium and the Coke Museum. And what it will be, there's a website on the adalegacy.com website that talks about who the National Center for Civil and Human Rights is, what's their mission, what's their goals. And they're going to be displaying content 5 different ways. There'll be large like pictures, there'll be touch screens, there'll be interactive things. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the disability rights movement will be represented in that center. And so when that center opens up this May, you'll know that we're part of the movement because will be illustrated in there. The other thing is they're going to be working, the National Center for Human Rights will be working with the Society on Disability Studies in 2015 when they're here, and they'll be doing some programming, and they'll actually be doing some broadcasting from the media facility at the center. So what I'd encourage you to do is just learn. Go to adalegacy.com, and one of the partners is the National Center. It's in the preservation section, and learn more about that center, but understand that our story will be part of the content.
Great. And so one of the things that just popped into my mind, of course, is that out here in California we have Disability Capital Action Day. This year I think that we're going to have a lot of things on our stage regarding IHSS, in-home supportive services, because it's a really key issue with things that are going on in California this year. But next year, of course, the Disability Action Coalition, which plans Disability Capital Action Day, will probably be looking to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I would like to just kind of go ahead. I have to talk to that coalition first, but to put it on your radar, Mark, and the ADA Legacy's radar of maybe joining us in the 3rd or 4th week of May in 2015 at the state capitol and bringing all of the stuff from the ADA Legacy project out here. I think we could do something really cool at DCAD this year. It's a few thousand people that come, and it really, really would be wonderful. And so I'm going to close this off with one last question. This year, of course, is an election year. And here in California, those of us working in the Disability Organizing Network are concentrating a lot of our efforts on voting. And I'm just wondering if you're going to have, because this is an election year and because you're bringing together a lot of history, pictures, images, stories, is that being used as a motivator, or are you going to have any materials that are motivators to get people with disabilities to get out and vote and increase our presence in elections?
That's another good idea. I would say right now that's a good conversation we'd like to have with NDLA, or the National Disability Leadership Alliance, is, you know, obviously with the Senate races, you know, the United States Senate race is so important. I know here in Georgia it's a important gubernatorial race. I think, you know, obviously the simple place to start is, you know, getting people that are running for re-election or candidates for office to ask them what their plans are, you know, as far as ADA, or once again, using some of your state-specific issues as hey, I know funding issues been out there. I know you've got some issues with the unions out there. I know you've got some issues with the potential required number of hours that people have to be trained, which kind of you know, doesn't address consumer control the way it can. So I would say there's nobody specifically working on those things yet, but it is another opportunity. And so if you have ideas or you're doing something, you want to point people around the country to what you're doing and to join them just like you did around the large gathering you have every year, then once again, it's all about possibilities, you know. What sticks on the wall? I mean, most people that know me know, you know, my skills are, you know, I'm an activist and community organizer. So every time I see something, you know, I want to stir it up and connect it. And so part of this project's about stirring up stuff and connecting people, because we have this whole other wave of young people that need to hurry up and put me in my place and take over. And the beauty of it is they have a lot of other tools available to them, like social media, to do that. And so the quicker people want to, you know, carve out a space here and most importantly lead it, the better. I mean, as you could tell from the partner stuff, is when someone asks me about exhibits, I can tell them about who the exhibitor partners are and to interact with them directly. Or if you want to see the statement that the National Disability Leadership Alliance is put up on their website about sub-minimum wage or some other institutional bias issues, then they're the folks to get in touch with and start engaging with them. So we're open to stuff around the election this fall. Just begin to talk about what might that look like and who might need to be involved and how can we promote it. But I think it is definitely an opportunity. And if you think about this in general, you know, we've already reached out to the White House. Claudette Gordon, the liaison there in the Public Engagement Office, and said, hey, in 2000, for the 10th anniversary, the Clintons, we did something at the FDR Memorial with the Clintons. We did something at the Union Station there in D.C. We used it as an opportunity to elevate some issues and tell some stories, and communities can do that. You know, just, you know, it's, once again, it's creating that sense of urgency. You know, next July is the 25th anniversary of ADA. Let's get these IHSS issues resolved by then, so that people can get on and living their life and not have to fight for survival.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. There is one last question about the copy of the PowerPoint presentation. We can send that out to folks. There was a rich text file of today's PowerPoint presentation that was sent out with the reminder. So if you look back at that reminder email, you have that in that reminder email as a downloadable file. Also, we can send folks the transcript of today's webinar from the captioner. Feel free to email me at ted@cfilc to get that. And I'm just going to go ahead and thank Mark again for a wonderful presentation. You've got the applause button there if you want to do the applause or raise your hand or show a smiley face to show your appreciation. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here. I want to remind everyone to check out the Do Network on the web. We have an interactive website at www.disabilityorganizing.net. On that website, we have our voter education page, information about our Access Now summits and our Access Now campaigns, news alerts, information, resources, and we also have our archive of these webinars on that website, as well as community profile pages for all of the independent living centers here in California, so you can find out who your local community organizer is or systems change advocate at your ILC and get involved with the Do Network. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/donetwork.org. We post a lot of our daily happenings on there, pictures, a lot of fun stuff, so check us out. And you can follow us on Twitter, and our handle name on Twitter is @donetwork.org. There's no dot between work and org. It's just @donetwork.org. And don't forget that we will archive this webinar. We have a training library. You go to our website, disabilityorganizing.net, click on Trainings and Events tab at the top, and then click on the Training Archive Library. We'll have this webinar up in about 7 to 10 days. And folks, please don't forget to take the survey. We really appreciate you participating in today's webinar, and we would really appreciate it if you would share your experience with us by completing the survey. Your feedback is highly valued, and participation is greatly appreciated for our future webinar opportunities. When you exit the webinar platform, a pop-up training survey window will appear. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you.